welcome back. It's Christine again with the Artist Pod. I hope everyone had a fantastic holiday and a happy new year. Today we are going to be drawing a cartoon reindeer. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here's the reindeer. So, when you're drawing something that's a little bit more cartoonish, it's a lot easier to do in my opinion. It's a lot quicker. And especially with the holidays right now, I haven't had a lot of time to do it, to do a lot of things, to do more videos, so I figured I could focus and talk about using my style to draw something that's a little bit more cartoony. I don't see a lot of my style being used for cartoon figures, so you have sort of this blend of realism and a cartoonish figure that should be interesting. Now, when you're doing it, obviously you're not, you're no longer copying how a figure looks. So I'll talk a little bit about, how I've drawn it, how I've sketched it, and then we'll go ahead and start filling it in. So when you're trying to add emotion to cartoon characters, it's pretty easy to do. You just sort of exaggerate the eyes. So if you want to add, if you want to make them look happy, you would do this, right? You have this sort of semicircle here, and then because when we're smiling, our eyes are sort of squinting together. So the right under the eye is going to be lifting up, and that's going to create that illusion that his eyes are smiling, which is going to be important to rendering it. And then you want to create sort of a smile on the face, and since it's a little reindeer, I have little, his little baby horns coming up, but you would have different expressions. In one of the videos, I'll talk about how to add different emotion to sort of cartoon eyes, ways to do it. But this is one way to make a figure look like it's smiling, is to have, this sort of half circle, half oval shape almost, going into this rising section here where the cheek is sort of pulling up into the eye. And then as you do it, when you're drawing the outside, you want that cheek bulging right under there, right? If this is pulling up, it's pulling up into this circle. This is all that cheek section right here. So, you want sort of this circular head going into the circular cheeks, and then coming down just above where you have the chin coming down. So I typically draw from inside out. Otherwise, though, we're going to draw it the same way we would draw anything else. So I'm just going to get started. They have tan. I'm going to do tan and white. And just like we do with any animal, I'm staggering the lines. And his nose is going to be white, which you see in a lot of reindeer. And because he's a cartoon figure, I'm not going to do what I typically do for figures. I am going to fill in the white of his eyes right around here, and then his eye color, and then his pupil is here. What's nice about doing cartoon figures, I kind of already mentioned it, it's not, I find it a bit easier to do, because you have a lot more flexibility with how you're drawing it out. You don't have to make it look like the animal. You need it to look enough like the animal that it's still identifiable. That's really the trick with drawing it in a more cartoon style. You still want people to look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a cat, or that's a reindeer, or that's a whatever. But you have a little bit more flexibility as far as eye placement, how you're drawing the mouth and the nose. It doesn't have to be, perfect. You have some flexibility. Even the coloration you can exaggerate if you choose. Reindeer, I still research it. I still look at the animal I'm drawing. I still looked at pictures of reindeer before I sketch this out. Just like I do when I am drawing more realistically. Because I want enough of, the details of that reindeer in here that, again, it's identifiable, that, somebody can look at this and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. That's really the trick when you're doing something like this, is you're stripping down information to more and more basic levels depending on how abstract or how cartoonish you go. You're stripping down the basic information that someone needs in order to process and figure out what animal you're drawing. Which can be a little tricky, but I find it to be a little easier. And then, you can add other details as well, like, creating a little bit of messy hair up top or whatever else that wouldn't necessarily be shown. You know, you can add those little extra flares here because, you know, it's a cartoon, so some of that is expected. I'm also probably going to give him some eyebrows. I just haven't decided if I'm going to do black or like a darker brown. Like with any drawing, you know, when you are sketching out a cartoon figure, just make sure, just like with anything, you know, whatever's on the right is on the left, right? So eyes, the way the nose is, the way the cheeks bulge out, like that needs to be sort of balanced. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want it looking skewed in one way or the other. So, you know, just making sure that, you know, that you're not shortchanging how wide his cheeks are on one side or something like that. If you've done it on one side, do it on the other, basically. If you want his cheeks to be smaller, you can, but make sure it's smaller on both sides. Unless you're turning his head. I mean, he's looking straight at us, so. Alright, now to get the white. You know, reindeer have sort of this dip in their noses here. And their noses aren't always white, but they can be. So that's why we are doing this. Sometimes they're black. Sometimes they're white. Alright, we're gonna wait to do the eyes, even though it's gonna be the same white color. And we're just gonna get started on adding the shadows and highlights. Alright, so I'm gonna have the light source coming from over here. Like always, that means it's coming from above and in front of, right? It's not coming from behind. It's not coming from beside him. Sort of analyze what's going to give your subject the best highlight. And in this case, it's going to be from above and in front of. Now they have long noses, so it's going to be jutting forward, and then on this side, obviously going into shadow. Probably going to have, well, like I always do, especially with such an obvious smile, you know, a burst of highlight under the eye that's opposite to the light source, because as his cheek's coming up, it would catch the light. And, you know, just like always, all edges go into shadow, even the side that's on the light source, because it eventually rounds away from the light source. Right under the eyes, it comes up here, it's going to be in shadow. And we're not going to have the typical shadow that we usually do right as it's coming here, simply because it's more cartoony, so it's not quite the same shape. Have some artistic freedom here. Still want to be mindful, though, of how that shape, how, you know, this reindeer would still be catching shadows and highlights. Even though it's a cartoon, it's important to still get that right. It's the shadows and highlights that create the illusion of three-dimensional space, no matter what you're drawing. And then this edge would be in shadow. And then underneath, you're going to have a shadow that sort of gets deeper as it goes further and further under. And you always want to make sure that's sort of tapered out nicely so that there's not a sort of a jarring line between highlight and shadow. Now, you know, we're coming up to his first antler. So if the light source is coming from above in front of, you know, if it's coming on this angle, its shadow is probably right around this angle, which is already going to be in shadow because it's rounding along the back of his head. So shouldn't have to do anything extra there. But it is something to consider in the event that, you know, the horns are positioned differently or something else. You know, being aware of where that highlight and shadow would be kicking in. Might be a little bit of extra shadowing through here, but for the most part, it's not going to really affect how we're going to highlight. And just like I often do, right, like some of this that I'm sketching in now in shadow will be in highlight. It's just so that I can figure out exactly where I'm going to cut the highlight to the shadow. Just helps me feel like I have a little bit more control and gives me flexibility so that I don't accidentally create a sort of a sharp line of highlight to shadow. Alright, now to taper out the shadow. Foreheads often have more highlight than a lot of the other places because it's closest to the light source, and because of the way it's shaped, there's no other obstructions in the way. So it's going to have a little bit more highlight coming across before it goes into shadow. Still being mindful that when you come to the edge of this, there's going to be a shadow cast by the horn coming up. We're going to give that little burst of highlight right under his eye. Now we'll get his ears. Right, this side's facing down, so it's going to be shadow. And then this back side, while facing up, would be rounding away on that edge. Put the highlight in the kind of the middle, but the middle towards the top. And then to the white of his mouth, and then we'll do the white of his ears, and then go to his horns and finish with the eyes. Right, you have an edge here, so this would be in shadow. We're kicking into highlight. You're also going to have an edge right under the nose, and then of course on this side this would all be in shadow. Well, most of it. Now this side, even though this is on the shadowed side right under the nose, there would still be a little bit of highlight here because it's pushed forward. Of course, it's not a real reindeer. It's definitely done more cartoon style, but I think it would still, help to indicate the nose is more forward than the rest of this, right? Just like it would be with like a cat or a dog, where the nose isn't interfering enough to create a big shadow. And then to create that recess into the nose, you're just going to taper this off, right? Like I'm going to put fewer and hold back on my pin pressure and push it all the way in. Right. And then we have his chin. Just like I usually do with chins, I'm gonna put the whole thing in shadow first, just like I do with the backside here, right? So I'm sorting out shadow and highlight, and do that here too. Gonna get his ears in. Typically with deer and stuff, you have sort of a bunch of loose hair that pushes to the middle. So we're gonna see how that works as a cartoon. And you have kind of a narrower avenue in the middle that kind of recesses in, so we'll see how that goes. Their horns are like an off-white, but not that much, so we're gonna go there and draw on his little baby antlers. Now for his eyes, I may also add a little bit of pink, very, very lightly, to indicate, tongue there, but for now, just doing what I do with pupils and making sure that these are both even and the same. Reindeer eyes are typically brown, so we're gonna put brown in here. So we're gonna use this to straighten it out. So first I'm going to add the highlights to the brown, and then we'll add the highlights to the white. First, I always do that line against the pupil on the opposite side of the light source, just where that would be catching light. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to fill it in. Now I am going to have this edge go a little bit into shadow, just like they are surrounded. On this side, it also goes into shadow, and I am going to have a cutoff up top, and we're going to have to mimic that in the white. That's why I'm going to do the brown first. And then on this back side, right, going into shadow, making sure it's sort of tapered into it. Also making sure there's not a jarring line from the that burst of highlight. You want to make sure that feathers in. Now I am opting to come all the way down here, right, like I did it with both. Into his cheek, although I accidentally just drew there. Because the way the eyes are like they're ovular, right? You can see that they go down further on either side where the cheek is raised up. So I'm going to have them coming all the way brightly down, and then on the edges of the eye have the shadow. Taper it out there to indicate that that circle would still potentially be catching the light. Wasn't quite working, so I'm changing this a bit. I'm pushing the highlight a bit higher. There was so much sort of dead space above the eye, it wasn't quite effective, so I'm picking up just a little bit more light than it was. Yeah, there we go. I don't think he looks too surprised. I was just trying to avoid him looking like startled. But I don't really think he does. And then we'll add the light flare. Yeah, I think that works. I don't even know that I need eyebrows on him. I think his expression does work without it. I wonder if I tried to add some how that would look. Let's see. Unless I make it darker, it's certainly not going to show up. Yeah, I don't know that we need it. I think it works. I think it works without it. I forgot to try and add the pink of a tongue in here, so let's see about that. Make it kind of gray and dark because we're not going to do anything too big. Just a little bit where it might be catching some light. It's nothing big, just a subtle hint that it's there. It's what we want. Yeah, there we go. Just a little burst. Alright, so that is how you draw a cartoon reindeer in this scratchboard style. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.